Having a well thought out villain can make or break any story. That's just true. In fact, it might be more crucial to your story's success than an interesting hero. Very often, though, a author will just kind of fall into a few tropes and have a few ideas in the formation of their villain that will make them inherently not that interesting from the beginning. First and foremost, more powerful does not equal more interesting. Prime example of that is Voldemort versus Dolores Umbridge. Yes, Voldemort is this super powerful dark wizard, but pretty much everyone who's read the series has way more feelings towards Dolores than Voldemort, because she has a more fleshed out personality and doesn't just rely on being, oh, look how powerful I am, as her entire characteristic. Dolores is an incredibly interesting villain because her personality is so hateable. Everyone who's read that book was just turning pages hoping to see Dolores get her comeuppance. A second problem that authors tend to put on their villains is that more evil tends to mean a better villain, which is just not true. In fact, a lot of the times it means they're less relatable and therefore less good for your story's overall arc. You need a relatable villain that the audience can kind of put in their shoes in, or at least be engaged in on some kind of intellectual level, so that it doesn't just feel like a big old baddie who needs to be taken down. A prime example of this is Magneto from the X-Men. He kind of is right in a lot of ways, and he's just a realist, while Professor X tends to be more of an idealist. It's interesting to see the engagement between the two, and it results in this ideological battle that, as an audience, gives you much more captivated than if Magneto was just everyone should be killing each other, mutants should be all powerful, screw the other guy. No, he just sees that the humans are oppressing mutants, and he's fighting back. The inspiration for these characters was MLK and Malcolm X, two real-life examples that were engaging in themselves, so making them into these other villains and heroes is fascinating. And just quickly on that same note, don't make your villain just want to end the world. That's not an engaging story, that's not an interesting idea, and it's certainly not original. Yes, all these previous three things worked for Sauron, but unless you're Tolkien, they're not going to work for you that well. There's one other idea that a lot of audiences kind of prop up and say they want this, and I don't think it's necessarily always a good thing, and that's the villain being a reflection of the hero. It can work, especially if your hero has some very stiff morals or ideas that they're going to stand behind, but especially if it's your second or third villain for that hero, try to change it up. Yes, it works for Batman and the Joker. They have a good relationship back and forth. That's interesting for a comic book hero-villain relationship. But if every villain just had the same balance to Batman that the Joker did, Batman's lineup wouldn't be nearly as iconic as it is. But that's why Batman has other villains, so that it's not always that reflecting ideological battle back and forth. You need some diversity. What I think more authors need to be focusing on to improve their villains is giving them a fully fleshed out character that has a full arc, therefore making that character develop in a way that makes it more relatable to the reader. If you see change in a character, it often makes you kind of reach out and more relate to that person. And if they do that with a villain, it makes that villain much, much more engaging. And it doesn't have to even be an arc as in the villain changing. It could just be an arc of the full character of that villain being unveiled to the audience. A great example of that would be Norman Bates. He never changes, but we just slowly come to see the monster that he actually is. Another fantastic villain from cinema is Jack Torrance, and he does have a full arc. Watching this man's internal demons slowly consume him and turn him into a monster that I think we all fear, our demons kind of pushing us to that edge and then over, was captivating and disturbing, and is really what drove The Shining to be the iconic movie that it is. Plus, everything Kubrick touches is phenomenal. There's one other villain that's certainly worth mentioning here, and that's Hannibal Lecter. This is a villain that in no logical way should be relatable, but is performed, written, and portrayed so well and so charismatically that every viewer or reader of that character starts relating to it in a really disturbing way, because we all know people are capable of evil, and Hannibal makes us really wonder, are we or is our neighbor capable of this level of evil? If you begin challenging whoever's experiencing the story you're telling, you're absolutely going to have a better end result. Make them question themselves and the world around them and their own political or social ideologies. It'll result in a fantastic fantastic story, and this doesn't need to be reserved for higher brow stuff. It can be in comic book movies. It's just a matter of lazy writing that we're not getting it. We know this because it has been before, and we just got a pretty good renewal of this practice in Killmonger and Black Panther. No spoilers, but he is a very engaging villain who makes you question who's really in the right. And if you really don't want to put in the time and effort to make your villain this engaging, there's one other thing you can do to make your villain certainly worthwhile, and that's make them the most hateable SOB out there. There are iconic villains who are that iconic because of how much everyone hates them. I already mentioned Dolores, so I won't go into her again, but Nurse Ratched from One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is still someone who, even when I mention, I get a bit of just flash of anger inside me. The writing for Nurse Ratched is done so well that anyone who watches One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which if you haven't, oh my god, go do it, goes from slowly disliking her to an utter hatred that's like in your gut. And yes, no one's going to relate to Nurse Ratched, but that level of hatred certainly is an achievement of writing. The last villain I'm going to mention here embodies everything I've said, from the hatred to the relatability to the believable level of evil. And this is Little Z from City of God. You watch this kid grow into the villain and the monster he becomes throughout this movie. And it's such an incredible portrayal of a realistic situation that you empathize and sympathize with this monster until the very end, while hating him and welcoming his death. It's sad, yet gives the reader a form of catharsis. It's believable, yet over the top, and it's something you know happens in the world today, so of course it's gonna hit home. When I first watched City of God, I had to rewatch it almost immediately just because the character of Little Z captivated me. It's a wonderful movie all around, but that main villain is certainly the driving force behind that movie for myself. That's just a little rant I had about good and bad villains, because I recently rewatched Thor: The Dark World. That is arguably the most bland, dumb villain ever. So that's just my thoughts and opinions on that. I hope you all enjoyed the video and my little rant about what makes an interesting antagonist to a story's protagonist. Please just start writing your antagonists like as well as you do your protagonists, and you'll all be good. Have a good one, y'all. Like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. Peace.